But first, if you're sitting at home tonight and grateful you're not living in the Socialist Republic of Victoria, well, don't get too comfortable, because if the Andrews government has its way, you'll be footing the bill for its ongoing incompetence, lockdowns and spin. It isn't enough that the federal government has paid out $45 billion to support Victorians during this pandemic, more than any other state and territory in per capita terms. That doesn't matter, says Victoria's Treasurer Tim Pallas. He still wants more.
It's not true to say that they've never done anything. They're just not doing anything now. And believe me, it's great that they put in billions of dollars into JobKeeper, but that was a historical contribution, and the challenge that Victorians confront is here and now, and the pain that particularly the workforce will be feeling is very real, and it's here and now, and the Commonwealth should be making a contribution.
Yeah, $45 billion, not a few billion there, Tim Pallas, and of course, 3 times what you've put in. And this Commonwealth state slanging match occurred because the Andrews government yesterday finally outlined its support package for business to help them survive yet another lockdown. And around $2,000 per business for a week or more of lost trade. Well, it's fallen a long way short of what they need to pay rent, wages, lost stock and more. Without JobKeeper in place to help cover their mistakes, what's clear now is that Pallas is feeling the heat. He knows Victorian Labor will now be held to blame without Scott Morrison writing the cheques to cover up their COVID management incompetence. That's why the Andrews government has a very clear political strategy of distraction and diversion, making this the federal government's problem if they can, and expecting you to pay.
It's about time the Commonwealth stopped with the words, stopped with the empty gestures, the rallying speeches with nothing behind them. This idea that we're working hand in glove when they never put their hand in their pocket is nothing short of a disgrace.
And of course, this strategy was backed into by Labor's federal counterparts. Here's the Canberra Labor frontbencher, Jim Chalmers.
The Victorian business community is being strangled by the Prime Minister's failures on vaccinations and quarantine. It didn't take long for this Prime Minister and this Treasurer to go from we're all in this together to now all of a sudden Victorians are all on their own.
Back to the Victorian Treasurer Pallas, saying it doesn't have to be much. Even a token from Canberra, he says, would be enough.
4 to 5 times over the last 3 or 4 days, I've had conversations with the Federal Treasurer urging them to make some contribution. Even got to the point where I said, even make it a piecemeal one so that we can pretend that you're doing something tangible when in your intent and in your efforts you're not. But the Commonwealth's view is that if these are short-term circuit breakers, then the states should pay for them.
Now, I know politics. Let me give you my theory here, because it doesn't seem right, does it, that Pallas would be prepared to accept a pittance. It's all about getting something, anything, even just a token, as Pallas says, because that gets the feds on the sticky paper. Of course, once the feds are back supporting Victoria with a JobKeeper style payment, even though nothing went to WA or Queensland in their recent lockdowns, it will enable the Victorian government to keep the state locked up beyond Thursday. Without federal government support, keeping people locked up without any income, it's hard. Get Canberra to pay, and I guarantee you Victorians won't be released come Thursday night. That's why Pallas is so desperate. Listening to the acting Premier James Merlino, you already get the sense that Victorians are headed back to the lockdown hell of last year.
Where we are today is those additional cases that we've gone through, high number of primary close contacts, high number of exposure sites, very concerning number of very high risk settings. So I want to be clear with people that the next few days are going to be so critically important, and that includes the possibility that this outbreak will get worse before it gets better.
Now, what I can't understand is that the Prime Minister first announced that he had secured vaccine buy for Australia late last year. So the states have all had months to get their systems for mass vaccination in place. What's gone wrong yet again in Victoria that this wasn't done weeks and weeks ago? The supply comes from the federal government, but the rollout, the big distribution centres, that's state government. Where's the hotline with enough staff to take calls from people wanting to book in their vaccination without crashing? The online booking webpage, accidentally released over the weekend, has now been withdrawn. It didn't work, I know, I tried it, and it won't be ready for weeks. How do we get to May or June tomorrow, in fact, with so little of this done? Here's the so-called guru, the bureaucrat Jerome Weimar, admitting that yet again they're behind the 8 ball.
So as I said, Lundy, yesterday, I mean, we are working on the online booking portal. The constraint on getting people vaccinated today is not the availability of the online booking portal.
If he had any decency, stuff up after stuff up, he'd resign. Now, as a result, over the weekend, there were people standing in line for hours waiting for their vaccinations. I was there myself on Saturday. It was nothing if not chaotic. I went to 2 of the big centres, and all these people standing together in the middle of a lockdown, very little social distancing. I tell you, it's a train wreck waiting to happen. Figures out today too show that Victoria's economic performance that used to be close to Australia's best is now slumped to the 2nd worst in the country, behind only South Australia. Even Tasmania is doing better than Victoria. Analysis by leading economist Saul Eslake on the front page of the Australian Financial Review today confirmed Victorians have been getting poorer under the Andrews government, with lower household incomes, deteriorating economic growth per person and poor productivity. In terms of disposable income, Victoria was 2nd lowest in Australia, more than $3,000 behind the national average. And here's the kicker from Eslake. He said Victoria's per capita growth over the past decade has been less than half the national average. And over the past 20 years, Victoria's per capita state gross product has gone from 100% of the national average to almost 10% below the national average. Now, last year, Victoria was downgraded by credit ratings agencies Moody's and S&P. And adding to these woes, Stephen Anthony, chief economist at consulting firm Macroeconomics, well, he's accused Victoria of running a Ponzi scheme with population to cover for their poor economic management. This fact was also picked up by Eslake, noting that by taking in 33% of Australia's migrants, but with just 25% of the population, Victoria has been covering up its deteriorating performance, he said, in productivity and per capita growth by relying on increasing population inflows. Now, for a man not prone to alarmism, Eslake was scathing. First, that Victoria has done itself severe damage by its incompetent handling of this pandemic, and worse, he said, that the police state of Victoria was almost more reliant on fines to raise revenue, making the police force a de facto state tax office. Sorry, but on every level tonight, things are not good for Victoria. Let's just hope Josh Frydenberg doesn't roll over to the bullies and make all taxpayers pay for the mistakes of a truly bad government in Melbourne.